many other...
This is right, Arab.
Hello and welcome to this WION live broadcast from Washington, D.C. I'm Nina Maria Potts, and our top focus in this bulletin remains the ongoing developments in Afghanistan. First, the headlines. Hours after Western officials warned of a major attack, two Islamic State suicide bombers attacked the Kabul airport, leaving at least 90 dead, including 13 US troops. A day after the Kabul blasts, anxious to leave, many Afghans are still waiting outside Kabul International Airport to flee the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. Britain is in its final stages of evacuation and will end the process today. Britain is no longer accepting people for flights out of Kabul beyond those already inside the airport. Turkey is yet to make a final decision on a Taliban request for support to run the Kabul airport after foreign forces withdraw. President Tayyip Erdogan says talks are still underway. And some 14,000 firefighters are facing challenging weather conditions as they continue to battle more than a dozen large wildfires across California. Twin suicide bombs rocked the Kabul airport on Thursday, where crowds of Afghans had queued up amid evacuation operations. The Islamic State Khorasan has claimed responsibility for the suicide attack that has left at least 90 Afghans, including women and children, and 13 US soldiers dead. The terror attack has already shaken the frantic evacuation efforts. US President Joe Biden has vowed to punish those behind the attack.
The 26th of August, 2021. While thousands of Afghans continued to gather at the gates of the Hamid Karzai airport in Kabul in a desperate attempt to flee. At around 6 p.m. local time, a suicide bomb ripped through the crowds outside the airport, leaving several dead bodies piled up. Panic deepened and the Taliban opened fire at the airport. As the injured were being rushed to hospitals, within minutes, a second suicide bomb went off near Baron Hotel, close to the airport's perimeter, creating scenes of terror and devastation. At least 90 people were killed, including 13 US troops, and over 150 were injured. The fatalities also included women and children. Reports say that at least 28 Talibs also died in the explosions. The first explosion at the Abbey Gate of the Kabul airport took place near a sewage canal, where some Afghans were waiting to be processed. Many of them were blown into the water. Videos shared on social media showed men and women in a tangled mess in the shin-deep water of the drainage canal. Survivors, stunned by the blasts, pulled themselves to their feet and began pulling out bodies from the drainage canal. Others were desperately shouting for help and searching the carnage for loved ones. Reports say there were 7 explosions in Kabul last night, 2 near the airport and 5 are presumed to have been carried out by the US forces. The airport bombings, claimed by the Islamic State group, came hours after Western governments had warned of a possible terror threat and asked their citizens to stay away from the airport. US President Joe Biden, who has been facing immense criticism over his administration's handling of the crisis, vowed to punish those responsible.
We will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay.
The Islamic State jihadists, rivals of the Taliban, have been responsible for some of the deadliest attacks in Afghanistan and Pakistan in recent years. The terror outfit has massacred civilians at mosques, shrines, public squares, and even hospitals.
Security remains tightened in the city, with threat alerts being issued for today as well, given that today is the day of Friday, and people and the Taliban, which are currently in charge, are trying their best to prevent any untoward incident. We're yet to see an investigation team being announced on yesterday's incident. Anas Malik in Kabul, Afghanistan, for WION World is One.
After witnessing the deadly suicide bomb attacks at the Kabul airport, many Afghans who wanted to escape Taliban rule have had their hopes turned to ruins. Some, however, were still not ready to give up on their last chance to flee. Less than 24 hours after the attack, desperate Afghans lined up on the tarmac near planes. Aircraft were seen leaving the Kabul airport. Outside the Abbey Gate of the airport, where the first explosion went off, in the aftermath, the blood-soaked clothes and other belongings of the victims left a tragic imprint as military personnel guarded the area. Reports say the area was extremely quiet this morning. The sewage canal at the Abbey Gate is where several bodies were pulled out from after they were blown into the drain by the explosion on Thursday. But as the day progressed, Afghan civilians began to gather again at the gates of the Kabul airport. Panic and chaos at the Kabul airport is at its peak, with just 4 days to go for the August 31st evacuation deadline.
I'm Alex, I'm a Canadian citizen, so we got an email to come here. But right now people have rushed. We don't know who's going where and what's happening. People who has documents, they cannot get in because of the people who does not have documents. So right now we got an email and everything to come here at the gate, but then we can't get hold of anybody where to go. So you can see it's a chaotic situation and people are everywhere. People came in with their house bills, no proper documents. So they're blocking the people who's supposed to go in. This is extremely terrible. This is inhuman, and I personally, I don't know what to say, because you look at this situation right now and you don't know what's going on.
Meanwhile, in the city, family members gathered outside a hospital to collect the bodies of their loved ones, while others are desperately seeking information on missing relatives following the blast.
One of my brothers was at the airport. He wanted to fly abroad. Unfortunately, he's missing after the back-to-back blasts. I don't know whether he was inside the airport or not. Americans are not allowing anyone to go there. He was in grade 11, a talented student. But in Afghanistan, such an atmosphere has been developed in Afghanistan that everyone wants to go abroad. And that's because of the troubles here. He too wanted to go abroad. He was empty-handed, no documents and no papers. He was accompanying a family there to show that he's a member of that family. But the blast took place when they were moving, and since then all of them are missing. Since yesterday, I have been searching all the hospitals in Kabul but have not been able to find him.
WION correspondent Anas Malik sent us this report from the north gate of the Kabul airport. Please take a look.
I'm standing outside the north gate of Kabul Airport's military side. A small explosion took place yesterday over here after the two suicide bombings. That explosion was said to have been a controlled explosion done by the US forces. People here complain for the lack of coordination. They have been alleging that the Afghan army has been told by the US forces that only those with US passports or green card holders be allowed and permitted to go beyond this point and into the gate. This is what the people have been alleging here. We've been seeing intermittent firing being done because the Afghan army controls this gate. The NDS 01 unit controls this gate, the ins and outs to it. And we've been seeing use of gunfire and flashbangs time and again by elements of the Afghan army in order to disperse the crowd, despite the fact that there was a bigger explosion very near to where I am on different gates. There are still people who are here desperately in a bid to flee the country. Anas Malik in Kabul, Afghanistan for WION World is One.
The deadly twin blast outside the Kabul airport has shaken the U.S. administration to its core. U.S. officials initially said that 11 Marines and 1 Navy medic had died in the attack. Another service member died hours later. At least 18 service members have been wounded and the death toll could rise. When U.S. President Joe Biden addressed the nation from the White House, his voice sounded emotional. He bowed his head for a moment of silence before taking questions from the press. The backlash against the Biden administration over the botched withdrawal is growing. However, Biden has stood firm on his decision. He believes that the situation could not have been dealt with any differently. In the latest address, he warned the attackers that the U.S. will hunt them down and make them pay. Listen in.
To those who carried out this attack, as well as anyone who wishes America harm, know this: we will not forgive. We will not forget. We will hunt you down and make you pay. I will defend our interests and our people with every measure at my command. Here's what you need to know. These ISIS terrorists will not win. We will rescue the Americans who are there. We will get our Afghan allies out, and our mission will go on. America will not be intimidated, and I have the utmost confidence in our brave service members who continue to execute this mission with courage and honor to save lives and get Americans, our partners, our Afghan allies out of Afghanistan.
The U.S. general who is in charge of the evacuations has said that the attacks would not stop the U.S. from continuing its efforts. The head of U.S. Central Command, General Frank McKenzie, has said that alternate routes are being used to get evacuees inside the airport.
The threat from ISIS is extremely real. We've been talking about this for several days. We saw it actually manifest itself here in the last few hours with an actual attack. We believe it is their desire to continue those attacks, and we expect those attacks to continue. And we're doing everything we can to be prepared for those attacks. That includes reaching out to the Taliban, who are actually providing the outer security cordon around the airfield, to make sure they know what we expect them to do to protect us. And we will continue to coordinate with them as they go forward.
The attack comes just hours after foreign troops were warned of a major attack. Afghans and foreign nationals were asked to stay away from the Kabul airport. However, the warning was largely ignored by Afghan nationals who are desperate to make their way out of the country. The Biden administration has been blamed for the chaos and violence at the Kabul airport in the past few days. Thursday's attack has further intensified political pressure on Biden from all sides. Republican leader Kevin McCarthy has called on House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to bring the chamber back into session. He demanded a debate on legislation that would prohibit the U.S. withdrawal until all Americans are out of Afghanistan. Pelosi has dismissed such suggestions as empty stunts. Republican Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has said that the humanitarian disaster is a result of Biden's weak and incompetent leadership. She has also called him an unfit commander-in-chief. Another Republican, Senator Marsha Blackburn, tweeted that Biden and his top national security staff should resign and face an impeachment trial. Let's go across to Susan Tehrani for more, who's joining us live from New York. Susan, what kind of pressure is President Biden now under domestically?
President Biden is facing increased backlash, as you mentioned, from a growing number of GOP lawmakers, but quietly from his own party as well, not only because of the botched withdrawal that we've been seeing in the last few weeks from Afghanistan, but also for losing American lives, which was a red line for the United States, really. And despite his assurances that we would get out of Afghanistan securely without the loss of lives, and he made clear that if this would happen, then there would be precautions. And we saw him make that statement last night as well. We'll have to see what measures he's planning to take. He did mention during his speech that he's been in talks with his military officials to come up with a plan to retaliate against ISIS. Despite this, it seems that the growing calls from GOP lawmakers for him to resign or be impeached is growing. One example you did talk about, Elise Stefanik, who's a congresswoman here in New York. She's been calling for his resignation even before we heard about these U.S. Service members being killed. After we heard about this news, immediately afterwards, she mentioned that President Biden has blood on his hands and he must resign immediately. That is the sentiment right now among many Americans, despite the emotional speech that we saw from him last night. So we'll have to wait and see how this moves forwards. And of course, Kevin McCarthy really calling on lawmakers to come back on Capitol Hill to see how the situation can be turned around before August 31st, although the situation does seem grim.
Stay with us, Susan. We'll come back to you in just a second. Let's listen into what President Biden said when he was asked by a reporter if he bore any responsibility for all that's unfolded in the last 2 weeks.
Do you bear any responsibility for the way that things have unfolded in the last 2 weeks?
I bear responsibility for fundamentally all that's happened of late. But here's the deal. You know, I wish you'd one day say these things. You know as well as I do that the former president made a deal with the Taliban that he would get all American forces out of Afghanistan by May 1. The reason why there were no attacks on Americans, as you said, from the date until I came into office, was because the commitment was made by President Trump. I will be out by May 1st. In the meantime, you agree not to attack any Americans. That was the deal. That's why no American was attacked. Imagine where we'd be if I had indicated on May the 1st I was not going to renegotiate an evacuation date. We were going to stay there. I'd have only one alternative: pour thousands of more troops back into Afghanistan to fight a war that we had already won relative to why the reason we went in the first place. As I've said 100 times, terrorism is metastasized around the world. We have greater threats coming out of other countries, a heck of a lot closer to the United States. We don't have military encampments there. We don't keep people there. We have over the horizon capability to keep them from going after us. Ladies and gentlemen, it was time to end a 20-year war. Thank you so much.
Susan, there's an inherent contradiction between pulling out of Afghanistan and hunting down the perpetrators of this attack. What's your sense of what choices and decisions President Biden now needs to make?
So we saw in that soundbite that President Biden mentioned that he takes full responsibility, but also, you know, sort of the attitude that we've been seeing from him just in the past few weeks, which has been increasingly reactionary. On the one hand, saying that he does take full responsibility, as he should as commander-in-chief, but also putting the blame on the previous administration for making this deal with the Taliban, and also sort of giving credit to the Trump administration for not having American lives lost until the May 1st deadline. But just going to what military officials and those that are familiar with the situation on the ground are now saying is that it's very difficult to really go after the perpetrators of what happened yesterday without having some kind of presence in Afghanistan. And just to pull the lens back and put things into perspective, if the United States military decides to pull out completely by August 31st, and you have really a situation where you're almost back at September 10th, 2001, where you have a breathing ground in Afghanistan for the terrorists, a terrorist hub right now, and it's going to be very difficult for the Pentagon to go after another attack as it's warning right now. So that's the fluid situation we're in right now, and there's just growing concern on how he's going to adhere to that promise of providing that safety and security, not only for the evacuation, but also for keeping Americans and Afghans and American interests around the world safe for another possible attack that he's warning about and the Pentagon is warning about as well, calling it almost imminent.
Thank you, Susan, for that report from New York. That was Susan Tehrani joining us live. That's all we have now on today's WION Live broadcast from Washington, D.C. For more global news and updates, stay tuned to WION World is One.
There are many other... this is right, Arab?